All right, everybody, good morning to you and yours. Happy Monday. And it's a hell of a way to start off not only a Monday, but any day when you wake up and you get to talk to this guy, the one and only. And truly, when you say this guy's name, there is truly one and only, Mr. Mike Tramp.
There sure is, but there's a lot of pretenders out there on Facebook, saying they're me.
You know what? That brings an interesting question. Not even pretenders on Facebook. In the world of music nowadays, a big thing is tribute bands. Is there like any White Lion tribute bands out there that you know of?
It's the only band who has not been tributed. I'm actually tributing it myself. Sadly, but
How
true.
about that? Well, I think you truly do. I mean, let's face it. You have one of the most unique voices ever in music and rock and roll. So it'd be pretty hard to try to come close to your voice.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always someone, and it's of course, there's also the different decades of Mike Tramp. We might end up talking about it a little bit later, or we might not. But the thing is that I've tried as I have moved along, as I've gotten older, as I've ventured into new musical adventures, that my voice should fit where I am and how I feel and my age, etc., etc. It's just simply impossible for me to sing like I did between 1984 and 1988. I also do not wish to sing like that. I don't like listening to myself from that period of time. But the truth of the matter
Really?
is that as time went by, I felt my voice was changing and not just getting deeper, but just a different way of singing.
Okay. You said something interesting. You don't like to hear your voice back from that time. Why is that?
Well, I mean, I think it's just something that just happened at that time. There are a lot of my heroes that I feel got it right
Hmm.
straight out of the gate. Um, I'm not necessarily feeling the same thing about myself.
Really?
When I started White Lion with Vito, and we started. I mean, the first song we wrote, "Broken Heart," is one of the highest songs that I ever sang, the original version,
Hmm.
and it just became something that you were doing, and I think it reflects on a lot of things of how I was feeling, and also all the things that was going on around me. I mean, I
Okay.
was right in the middle of the 80s, an exploding volcano of music and
Right.
videos and colorful clothes and big hair and everything like that. And it was a wonderful time. It was a great time. I loved every minute of it. Right now is not that time.
Well, it's funny you say that because honestly, um, before I even when I got the email last week with the advanced copy of the new album, I went through and I was listening, and we have my co-host Sam the cat's here with us to hang out.
Yeah.
So I listened to the album, and then even going back and listening to the classic White Lion stuff, like listening to both the updated versions and the classic versions, there's just something about White Lion. Like, do you ever, when you listen to music and it gives you kind of like that, like tightness in your heart and your chest, and it's like a weird, I guess, like a melancholy feeling of like it was just putting me back into those days of, like you're saying, of the 80s, and for me being the late teenage, early 20 years, and it was just such a just that like magical time of life where everything was just carefree, a little crazy, a little wild, and you didn't have the modern day pressures of an adult and parenthood and all these other things. But just brought me back to, and it's only White Lion. It's weird. Only White Lion gives me those feelings. I still just envision myself being that teenager in my car with the windows down and White Lion cranking and just loving every minute of life.
Interesting. Now let me turn the table and then ask you the question. Do you feel uh, different when you hear the 2023 version versus 1987, which is of course when you were a teenager and looking towards all the wonderful things a teenager will explore, etc., etc.
Okay, so I will put it to you this way. 'Cause actually, I thought about that. I thought to myself, I'll compare it to a Van Halen. Like, Van Halen to me with David Lee Roth was just that time, that teenage time of, wild and crazy and over the top and rock and roll. But then with Sammy Hagar, it's like mature. You've matured now, and and it took me like when I was younger, in the time that Sammy came in, I couldn't appreciate it. But now, when I want to listen to Van Halen, I always choose Sammy over Dave because I'm mature now and I can appreciate what Sammy did. So now I can totally appreciate what you've done now, Mike, 30 years later.
I really just appreciated what you just said there because I'm a true Van Halen fan myself. I wouldn't have come to America if it wasn't because of David Lee Roth and stuff like that. But that was then, and this
Right.
is now, and later became not then anymore. And I totally understand what you say, that everything has a time and a place. And sometimes that
Hmm.
time and a place has to just remain in that place and not moved forward. Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs died out. Don't bring them back. I mean, it's just one of the things. And I also feel the thing is that when I put Sammy on, I mean the Van Halen with Sammy, I take that very serious.
Yeah.
It's different. It's like, and Eddie expressed it a lot of times. It's like, man, Dave was goofing around all the time. Now we're a serious band. Now then later on, when I know this is an interview about Mike Tramp, but it's still the same thing.
Yeah.
Later when Roth comes back, it's almost that the show and the nonsense from the stage and half the lyrics and half the verses doesn't have the same effect now that we're grown-ups and we're not just a part of the party. Now we look at we looked at Van Halen with when Roth returned with completely different eyes and not so much in awe. I think that
Yeah.
maybe now we just wanted a little bit of the circus gone and the music to remain and be
Hmm.
performed a little bit more serious than just a couple of yeeps and yaps here or there. And you don't recognize the song when Roth sings it live.
That's right.
Now, I don't want to put myself in that same category, but I'm a young man in 24 and going full
Hmm.
force, man, pedal to the metal, all that kind of stuff. Can I
Right.
go any higher? Well, I'm sure gonna try. And when I ended White Lion in 91, already on the final White Lion album, Main Attraction, not just me, but Vito and I were already placing the band on a different track to head somewhere else, a place where Rat, Poison, Motley Crue were not going.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and diss any. Those bands were just as much as my heroes when I came to New York in '82 and I
Hmm.
started soaking up that rock and roll. Um,
Right.
but the thing was that as much as Vito and I were sort of molding ourselves around Eddie and Dave, when it came to our songwriting and when it came to my European upbringing and my choice of lyric,
Hmm.
we were not even close to them. We were in
Yeah.
our own way. And Vito and I wanted to continue White Line in that direction. It's just that when you take Circus Magazine or Metal Edge 1988,
Yeah.
every band basically looks the same. Every
Yeah.
band poses the same. Every
Same
band
photo shoots. Yeah.
that is just how the business was. And every video on MTV almost looked the same when it came from a hard rock 80s band.
Hmm.
It was tough to be Kurt Cobain in
Hmm.
1988 and being the diversity, straying from the flock when everybody was standing there looking the same and everybody wanted to go the same place. Of course, with time that would change, and with time also the songs would stand the test of time of where the songs came from and where they belong. Um,
Hmm.
and I mean, we can jump ahead of ourselves. And, I wrote When the Children Cry in 1985. Ronald Reagan was the president. Mikhail Gorbachev was sitting behind the wall on the other side of the world. I wrote a song about 2023 in 1985. When the Children Cry has stood the test of time through all that and has never fallen into that category of just any 80s ballad. It's a song that stands
Yeah.
by itself, and you can place it almost anywhere, and it'll fight for itself.
Which I want to say too with that song. That's a song that always like I honestly I couldn't even really listen to that song even back in the day. 'Cause it was just such a sad song, and now with the updated version, it's like again, it's like it's still got that sadness to it, but it just has a whole new world to it now. I truly love the updated version more than the
Yeah,
original
well,
one.
I mean, I do too. Um, and of course I enjoyed it back then. Now when I sing it,
Hmm.
I'm a man who's lived a life, a man who has children, a man who's had his heart broken, a man who's lost his money, fought his way back, lost his money again, now just accept that he's only going to make so much money. I'm a man that the sound of my voice is my soul. It wasn't in 1988. It's just the way it is.
Yeah,
And that's just somehow, just something that we hadn't counted on,
yeah,
but we're going along with it, and it's all fine. You know what? I'll try to throw something funny in. The return of Indiana Jones. You want Indiana Jones to be 72 years old now because it's that long ago. So don't put him in too many of a dangerous situations. He can only run this fast.
right,
And I am like that too. When I go out on stage, you're going to see someone with confidence coming out, but you're
right.
not going to see someone jumping from the drum riser.
It's funny because let me ask you this, and I want to relate it to past career I had. I was a professional wrestler. I did professional wrestling for a number of years, and when I started my training um, back in 1990, my teachers they would teach you like how to land properly so you don't get hurt, and they would say to me, "Look, make sure you're landing this way because when you get to be my age and you get older, you're gonna regret it." And I remember I still picture myself walking to the locker room after training one night saying to myself, fuck them. They don't know what they're talking about. I'll be fine. I'm this 20-year-old snot nosed kid. Now that I'm 53 and I'm waking up in the morning and I'm getting up off the couch or off the chair, I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? I screwed my whole body up. Do you kind of like have that your voice now? You think back like, what was I thinking? Why did I do that?
I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, I say it all the time. Um, who gave rock and roll carte blanche? I mean, we accept when I came to America, Joe Namath had already retired, and I remember these, commercials for whatever it was he did, and if you saw him walking, you could always see those knees. They're only gonna hold him so long.
Right.
It's just a fact. Most sports stars, in professional soccer, European Premier League and stuff like that, rarely people make it to 30,
Right.
and stuff like that. There are some people, and most NFL players don't really age well. They have taken such a beating. It's
Mhm.
just a fact. not just
Sure.
the training, the intake of all kinds of different stuff. Rock and roll also, took in a few things here and there, so
Yeah.
it pays the price. But let's just say, like me, who never did any drugs and just like a couple of cold beers and watch a ball game, and that's about it. Of course, I feel it.
Yeah.
Of course, I feel it. And so I have to I have to choose what I want to do and how I want to do it, because I don't want to go out there and be fat Elvis. I want to go out there and be the best I can be. And I
Right.
loved Elvis Presley, but I didn't want to see him go out that way.
Yeah.
So when it came, I mean, I've been trying to avoid in reality going back and doing in the White Lion journey once again, because I mean, I have 13 solo albums, which clearly states who I am as a songwriter and as an artist.
Hmm.
But no matter where I went, the concert poster always featured White Lion as big, if not bigger, as my
Right.
name. And
Right.
every promoter would always sell that. And I accepted that. The problem was that when I walked on stage with a guitar around my neck, I wasn't playing White Lion. I
Right.
didn't sound like White Lion. My band couldn't play White Lion. They had been specifically picked not to be playing 80s music. They,
Right.
if the guitar player even looked at playing a solo, I'd kick him in his knees. When this idea came up about doing an album, which in reality is a concert poster for me. It's not
Mm.
an album that I'm looking to have like a record career. It's basically the album cover is basically a concert poster. It says Mike Tramp, Songs
Mhm.
of White Line. So there's no question what it is that's behind those doors when you get in there. So for almost a year, I worked with Marcus Nand, my guitar player, their guitar player, who plays all the guitar in White Lion, because we always knew, and I always knew that I was not going to do anything without both honoring and trying to be as true to Vito Brada's guitar playing as possible. The
Right.
problem just was that I could not sing those songs in that key and get up the next morning and have a voice.
Yeah.
Marcus worked on these songs for such a long time. And finally, he came back to me and says, I think I have mastered it and being able to play these songs when people hear Wait and that legendary guitar solo, All Little Fighter, and another incredible guitar solo.
Hmm.
They're not going to feel cheated, like oh, he's just singing the songs and stuff like that. You actually going to feel like it is Indiana Jones 2023. He's got the hat,
Right.
he's got the back, the jacket. It's the same, almost. It's just a bit of
Eh, So let me ask you that though. I mean, like you said, you've done a solo career for many years, many solo albums. You've toured around the country and the world, and it's almost kind of like uh, the scene from The Godfather. Just when you think I'm out, they pull me back in. Is
I
that
think
like White Lion for
that.
you?
I've said that.
It's like
True. It is really true. And without any disrespect, because it's just very important. I mean, for the last 10 years, I toured the US seven times, and I've
Mhm.
always told, just with my acoustic guitar, I've always told these big stories. And I know that, people come to see it, want to hear those stories and see, behind the curtain and so, without the hairspray, without the makeup and stuff like that.
Right.
And the thing was, I would not be doing this if I didn't have to. The
Yeah.
only the only thing that makes it right is that I wrote these songs and I'm the
Mhm.
voice of those songs. So I'm not
Yeah.
out doing something that's not me. It's just that when I ended White Lion and told Vito the band is done, I thought it would be I thought it would be done. But then they pulled me back in.
Does it get frustrating too, like a Skid Row? every interview they do, and I get tired of seeing it. When you see Dave or Rachel get it's why not a reunion with
Yeah.
Sebastian? Why don't you just get back with Sebastian? And you kind of have to endure the same thing with Vito. Doesn't it just kind of like it's like so frustrating to hear the same question over and over?
Yeah, it is. It's a little different because Sebastian continued with a very strong career on the side, while Skid Row was sort of in many ways almost in the shade of his appearance, because
Hmm.
Sebastian Bach is pretty loud both in voice and visual and stuff like that. And I remember Skid Row, and they're good friends of mine, and Vito, and when they toured with us before they actually released the first album, and so I totally understand that. I totally understand that. Vito retired in 91. You can say he
Right.
retired, even though there's not an official statement. But when you have been away for something for almost 20, no, 33 years, so
Yeah.
what am I going, 33 years, and you were talking about wrestling before. I was, of
Hmm.
course, also coming to America. I was a big fan of the early guys and all stuff like that. And then, someone would go away, and suddenly, 2 years later, the return and stuff like that.
Right.
Rambo, Sylvester Stallone, well, still have a Rocky movie in me, etc., etc., etc.
Sure.
But the thing is, not every reunion is a great reunion. And
Mm.
I both Vito and I know that, and Vito has never pushed for even doing a song together or anything. And
That's right.
I said in another interview last week that it's only about 10 days ago I wrote Vito, says, I said to him, I'm going out into the world right now to perform the songs you and I wrote.
Right.
Just a fact. And everyone will ask me,
Hmm.
what's Vito doing? And the thing is that I've gotten past making fun of it, because I don't have the right. But I do wish that Vito would make a statement, because the only interview Vito has done is with our joint friend Eddie Trunk, who
Yes.
grew up with White Line. He was with us from the beginning. And it's about almost 10 years ago. And there's a sentence where Vito says, well, I haven't closed the door. And every 3 years they rehatch this interview. And it's like, oh, Vito said they haven't closed the door. Uh, they built a fucking wall, But I also said to Vito, so they can rehash my statement that says, Vito, if it was that you felt like doing something together, maybe what Robert Plant and Jimmy Page did when they knew they did not want to reform Led Zeppelin,
Right.
you know where I am.
Hmm. Hmm.
We would not be a better White Lion 2023 than we were in 88. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, how not even just looking at it like again. I know you can't speak for Vito, but have you yourself ever thought of it like the four of us were still alive, we're still able to do this? Like you said, why not just one more song and just put it to rest and say, all right, this is it. Let's close that chapter and be done with it. And Mike Tramp can be Mike Tramp. Vito can go back into whatever he's doing. The other guys are doing stuff in music still. Like
Makeup sex doesn't always feel good.
that might be the greatest answer I ever heard. That was
I'm, I'm,
good.
I'm fortunate that James Lomenzo, bass player in Wide Line at that time, have remained great friends through the years. And every time James have come to Denmark, where I reside, either with John Fogerty or with Megadeth, or when I lived in Australia, James came there with Megadeth. You know, we never talk about this. We just talk about our great friendship, and we know we had a great time. We know we had a great time, but the thing is
Right.
that, man, it is the closest thing to a failing marriage, a band that doesn't work. Being in a
Right.
rehearsal room with a guitar player who simply can't get his guitar tone together, and the drummer, sitting and banging in the snare drum, and nobody wanting to be there together. That's
Mm,
just not something I want to relive.
mm.
Nobody in the band I'm actually the only one who talks to all three guys
Wow.
in that way. Um, it's just the way it is. But the memory of Vito Bratta, my Tramp, exists on the albums, and I
Sure.
have now, given life again on the new album. That is the creation that Vito and I did, and that will, as long as they'll, keep, making new formats of music, that music will travel, with it.
So when you sat down to actually start doing this, and Marcus said to you, like, I think I have everything a way that we can make this work. Was it tough for you to embrace? I mean, because I know you've tried to embrace it a few times over the years, and you've admitted yourself in interviews it was kind of half-hearted. Was it kind of like hard for you now to fully dive into this and say, all right, it's time. I can really go back into that world.
Yeah, I respect that you say that I've sort of tried it between 2005 and 2009. I was called back into it. I was
Yeah.
pulled into it, pushed into it, and of course I went willingly. But when I go back and when I hear some recording of some stuff that I try to brand under the White Lion banner, I can clearly hear that the only thing I didn't want to reproduce was the sound of White Lion. And then I ask myself the question,
Mm.
then why are you White Lion?
Yeah.
And and I was struggling with repeating my Tramp 1988 almost 20 years later at that time.
Hmm.
And so it was not something that I enjoyed. Now, now when I was recording the vocal in my own studio and stuff like that, I was singing with a smile on my face, never having to think about where the song was going. The song is my DNA, it's in my spine. I can sing the song backwards, standing on my hands and stuff like that.
Right.
And with the music being so, I don't want to use the word comfortable in rock and roll, but I was
Hmm.
very comfortable. So therefore I realized, now I love the songs, now I feel I'm back in it. uh, I control the songs don't control me, which they had done 15 years early on, when I was really trying to repeat myself from 1988 or something like that. And
Right.
I was half out, and now I was half in, and it was like it wasn't agreeing with me. So
Yeah.
now it's 100% about just enjoying this. And this is obviously, if shows allow me, that I will be doing, because it's not a new career. It's just me performing songs written by Vito Bratta and Mike Tramp from a band that will not reunite again. You started by asking, is there a Wide Line tribute? I now call this the only Wide Line show in the world.
There you go.
I go smile and I just say, what a joke. But it's just the fact, this is the only White Line show in the world.
Right. Was it kind of too like when you were going back over this? Was it kind of almost like writing an autobiography, like looking back at your career, revisiting these songs again?
Oh, the thing is that I played these songs on piano. I played these songs on acoustic guitars back and forth. I can play these songs in so many different versions. So, the melody line is just, it's part of my anatomy. It sits there. It's like, a groove into, a cave, from 5 million years ago, that somebody was there, and it's just left there. It's there. And it tells me, you are Mike Tramp
Hmm.
from White Lion, and there's no way. getting around that. Embrace it. You're not out there digging a hole in the ground, obeying some boss who's only paying you the half wages or stuff like that. You live and have survived for 46 years from the songs you have written. You've never had to do anything else. Now, I do a lot of other things. I'm very handy. I love being physical, building and stuff like that. So it's not that. But the thing is that music has been my life for 46 years, and it's how I've you know paid the electricity bill. Put my kids to school. Et cetera, et cetera.
When again, when you sat down to do this, did you contact Vito first and say, "Look, this is what I'm going to do"? Just make sure it was okay with him first. Like, did you get his blessing or?
No, I've never done things like that. No, 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 no. Vito and I have had the conversation because we've had a few,
Sure.
unavoidable lawsuits, where, and Vito always said to me, he says, "Man, it's not that I want to sue you, Mike, but the thing is, man, I don't want to look at YouTube and see White Line when the children cry, and then see some other guitar player."
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it didn't really hit me, but then with time, and as I departed from my first attempt of being, back in the White Line world, I
Hmm.
started understanding the point. Um, I have joked around from time to time because I've also been around many of these uh, monsters of rock crews and stuff like that. And at some
Right.
time, you stand there and you look up at the stage and you see the logo of the band, and there's nobody from the original band up on stage.
I'm glad you brought this up. Go ahead.
No, I have to bring it up, and
Yeah.
I don't have a problem. I really have a problem watching a video of Foreigner and not seeing Lou Graham in the band.
Mhm.
Now that Mick Jones is also not in the band, sending 7 new guys out, a little younger with, being able to sing the songs and stuff like that.
Right.
That to me does not make any sense whatsoever. I understand, like we were talking earlier about, David Lee Roth leaves Van Halen. Van Halen wants to continue to get Sammy Hagar in. That is a different issue, et cetera, et cetera,
Yeah.
and so on. So Journey, comes back, they find a singer somewhere in the world that is as close
Hmm.
to Steve Perry as possible. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I feel for one of my heroes, which is Steve Perry, sitting
Hmm.
at home and seeing some guy, maybe 25 years younger,
Yeah.
you know, out there being able to sing these songs, every night, having the vocal range and things like that, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's like, both men and women, replace their partners with a younger person.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there were an old movie in the 70s called They Shoot Horses, Don't They?
Well, actually, the question that I wanted to ask was kind of along that line where what, how would you think you would have felt if, I saw you were saying like when you and Vito decided to part ways in '91, it was kind of like you were just like, all right, that's it, I'm done after the show, and Vito didn't say nothing, record company, imagine nobody like tried to talk you into staying. What if that moment never happened, or they talked you into staying, and you and Vito continued to make music throughout the years, but like most of these bands that we see, it then becomes like a rotating door. Say James would have left or Greg would have left, and you would have like been replacing your rhythm section throughout the years, but it still would have been you and Vito. Would it have been weird or uncomfortable for you to continue going as White Lion?
Well, I mean, the thing was that the final White Lion chapter, most Americans don't know about. We had had a massive European tour. The band was really big in Europe, and we'd gone over there to start the tour before doing anything in America. And when we came back from Europe, James and Greg left the band.
Hmm.
And Vito and I got a new rhythm section in, and we felt like we also felt at that moment in a funny way, like we'd gotten, two new young wives or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just that, injection of energy and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Smiles. It's nice to be in the rehearsal room again. It's short lived though. And then we went out on the road on the East Coast for about 3 weeks and testing out the band and stuff like that. Of course,
Hmm.
this is also towards the end of '91 when grunge is really making their first big steps, and I could feel, and I'm sure all other people could feel, I could feel it was making a heavy impact on the
Yeah.
business and on MTV. We weren't that, welcomed, and things like that. And,
Right.
even when we played a sold out show back in New York City with the new rhythm section, the Atlantic Records, our record company, did not even show up. And it really pissed me off.
Hmm.
And at that moment, I was, testosterone and all kinds of kind of going on in me. So I took it upon myself to say, Vito, I say, next week when we play Boston, which was the final show on the tour, it'll be the final show of the band. And I can't even say today why that was that I made that statement. But Vito just looked at me and says, okay. And for 20 years, we never discussed this again. But you
That's
mentioned
amazing.
about if the record could have convinced me. The thing was that the day after, the week after, the months after, nobody which were part of the White Lion organization, the record company, the merchandising company, our managers, the publishing company, all people that were making money from us, and et cetera, et cetera. And the band still had, 3 or 4 albums, Atlantic Records, and so on, so on, so on, so.
Right.
There were nobody calling. There were not even one single phone call. Now, if that phone call had come and, like we had these 2 Italian managers, which were always like, the Godfather, like you said,
Yeah.
they spoke a different way. If they said, we'll meet in a month and they talk it over, Vito and I would have been, because Vito and I always only really talked about music. We didn't really share anything else, but we were very focused. We never had a single issue when it came to songwriting or talking music. We were one all the way, and it was phenomenal to work that way. And it's also one of the reasons Vito always said, "I'm just not interested in working with anybody but this." But we would definitely have looked upon or looked at the difficulties awaiting us out there with the changing in the music business.
Hmm.
Was we were already on the main attraction album, taking the first steps towards going much more in the direction of, for example, Journey or Kansas or some,
Right.
uh, you know, early progressive rock and roll within limitations,
Sure.
but much less, of course, also with my own lyrics away from that, and of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but
Hmm.
more serious issues. And it also what Vito wanted to do and things like that. So we would have separated us even more from there. We would probably separated ourselves so far that they wouldn't even wanted to put us in Circus magazine. But that didn't happen. That didn't happen. And already on the flight back from Boston to my house in Los Angeles, I formed the band that would be called Freak of Nature, and recording 3 albums the next 3 years after White Line. I had already formed that. I hit the ground running. When I arrived, 5 hours later in LA, I already had the whole concept of what that band was going to be and how
Wow.
I was going to regenerate everything, go down at the gutter, start in Europe, build it up in a completely different way. All that other stuff didn't matter to me because I'm driven by friendship and things like it was one of the things that Vito and I didn't have. We didn't have any social everything outside white line that where we share things, went to the movies, went to car races and stuff like that. We
Wow.
only were together in White Lion, and it was something that I was missing tremendously because I come from a background of Copenhagen, Denmark, with a massive friendship, strong friends that are still here today, and
Sure.
friends to me, and daily activities with your friends is something that really mattered. That is something that I had with James, and that
Okay.
is it. It was very easy to rekindle our friendship once the smoke had cleared and
Sure.
he had the new band and I'd started Freak of Nature and we were start moving on in our life.
It's like initially, like when you were talking about that time, like I was saying to myself, um, you seemed very hurt that you weren't hearing from the record company or anything like that. But then you said like you're on the airplane, you already have things in motion and the new plan and new band already lined up. So did you? I guess it's through that initial period, like right afterwards, you weren't like depressed or angry or anything by nobody even reaching out, like you said, to say, yo, Mike, why don't we just sit down and have a conversation, see if we could salvage this?
No, it was quite the opposite. I was like charged with so much energy of starting something that and I'm going to be careful with this word, 100% controlling, of
Mm,
just taking the direction,
sure.
because once I start doing stuff like that, I already have everything together in that way, and that's just because my driving force is so energetic that I simply will not lay down before it's completed.
Right.
Um, and so I didn't even it later on retelling the story. I'm of course wondering why I was not getting the phone
Mm,
call, but
yeah.
at that moment, I didn't think about it. I would have answered the phone calls, and I would also have shown up and listen to the conversation, and if Vito would be fighting for the band and stuff like that. I mean, Vito has also never said to me, man, I really wanted to fight for this band. So it's always like you know unspoken but mutual that we felt that way, and it's difficult to put in place, but you know Vito didn't call me neither.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems totally like, and I had read where you yourself, you made a commitment at a young at 16. Your life is rock and roll, and that's what you're going to do. And it seems like Vito didn't have that commitment, nowhere near what you thought in life.
Yeah, no, I mean, and this is of course no putting down.
Hmm.
Uh, mm, it comes down, and sometimes I have to defend myself when I read, comments and stuff like that, because the quote unquote, and of course, this is, I'm very happy that I have, a good relationship with Vito. I just wish that we would talk a little bit more, and that wouldn't be so secretive, in Vito. But the word out in the world is that Vito decided to take care of his family, and his mom was sick and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then I just go, when my mom died, my dad died, my brother died, my children lives on the other side of the world.
Hmm.
Um, what am I, chopped liver? I don't have any heartaches. I don't have any problems. I don't stuff like that. And everybody that I played with have complained about the problems in life.
Sure.
I have the same problems, but I decided, and like Robert Johnson, even though I'm not a blues man, I
Mhm.
also signed the deal at the crossroads. I am rock and roll for life. I have no pension. I have no savings, etc., etc. This is the life, that I've been living since 1976, when at age 15 and a half, I told my mom I'm leaving school, I'm joining a rock band. And
Wow.
it's just the way it is, so I will take the good with the bad.
Mm,
Positive thing is that I come from nothing. I come from a very little poor family, divorced family, etc., etc. My strength is living on the streets. I
wow.
don't feel comfortable in Beverly Hills. I don't have a drink. I'm not afraid of shaking people's hand. Usually I give them my PIN code to my credit card. It's just the place that I feel most comfortable. I don't have to get up in the morning, look myself in the mirror and saying, "What lie what
Mm,
lies do I have to tell today? What kind of
yeah,
makeup do I have to put on? What kind of mirrored sunglasses do I have to hide behind?" It's not who my tramp is. And
yeah.
I showed the world that, 10 years ago when I ventured out and with an acoustic guitar and a suitcase full of T-shirts and CDs, and meeting people, that this is actually where I'm much more at home.
And I was going to say that to you too. And I said before we went live, we did an interview 7 years ago, um, and that's I can still. It just stands out to me so much in that interview. You said that you said you love nothing more than coming here to the United States, renting a car. You have your suitcase, your acoustic guitar, and you just drive across the country and just play your songs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of life. It's not a job. It's not something I do because I have to. It's something that I do because I want to and because it's what I am.
Hmm.
And I've always been amazed about, I mean, I played with the biggest rock bands in the world, and at one time or another, I was outselling some of them,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. But I've always been amazed of how fragile some of they were, and how some of them couldn't even tie their own shoe and things like that, and wondering, what are you going to do when it's not here anymore? And
Yeah.
stuff like that. I mean, during the COVID shutdown for 2 years, I had bought an a ruin, of a farm. There was nothing. There was just the roof, but it cried out and says, "This is where you want going to be." And I took upon this massive task, and with a little help from a few friends, and especially my brother, I've rebuilt this place and created a whole new world here, with very little
Wow.
money, a lot of things like, and it just made me stay center, because when it comes to music, I don't really need a lot of inspiration. My songs, and it did the same thing with Vito and I wrote. The songs came to us very, very quickly. We did not
Mhm.
work on the songs a long time. I mean, songs like Wait and Tell Me and Little Fighter, I mean, half an hour and those songs were down. We didn't need to go out and look for inspirations and stuff like that. And it's still the way today. I write the songs very quickly. They come to me, and then I'll sit down and I'll listen to the music and sort of what I'm singing, and I now look for what the song is telling me I should write about.
Wow. So now you're actually going to be going out on tour with a full band, electric, plugged in, and doing these songs.
Yeah, I mean, to actually the first tour that we're doing in America, I'm only doing it together with Marcus, the guitar player.
Okay.
But we're and this is a compromise, because the fact of the matter is there's no finance for a full band, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
But I've constantly evolved with this production to make sure that I can get out. And a lot of these places I played on every tour I've done in America, and it enables me to go in and give these fans a chance to see a smaller version of Madison Square Garden in a
Hmm.
truck bar, and you'll get the same smile I would have on Madison Square Garden.
That's awesome. That's exciting, Mike. It really is.
It is.
It's almost like you know you've come full circle. You've come to grips with things, and you embraced everything. And do you think it's almost like a I don't want to say a closing of the chapter because it's like starting a new chapter, but kind of along that lines.
Yeah, it is a closing of a chapter because I have arrived where I am.
Yeah.
And so, and I identify with my age, my voice, my love for things, and my statements, and where I am. I'm very confident in who I am. I don't need to try to be in anyone else. You started the show by saying, there's only one my Tramp in the world, and that happens to be me. So that's
Yeah.
just who I'm going to be. Yeah, and I'm I'll be okay if this was the final day of my life right now. I wish that I can have another 20 years of how I feel right now, with everything. I wish that my health and everything else allows me to go in. I'm also preparing for the chapter where I will just be sitting on a chair, leaning up at the piano and singing the songs. So I
Mm.
am I am evolving with everything, and in some of the interviews I've been doing, I've been reflecting on that last year I released my first album singing it in my mother tongue, in Danish,
Hmm.
and that's something that I've been waiting for almost 40 years to do. And the
Wow.
second I did that album, which is so diverse from my rock world, it gave me the strength and the love to do the White Lion thing, which you were
Mm.
asking earlier about, of how I felt about that. And it's
Right.
really just a matter of having these different sections, of when you go hunting with the boys, you go hunting with the boys, and when you go, visiting, the in-laws with your wife and stuff like that, that's when you
Hmm.
do it quiet and you just accept that you're going to be there for 4 hours, even though you'd rather be hunting with the boys and stuff like that. It's all just a matter of like being where you are at the moment.
Absolutely. All right, two more questions, and I will let you go. Number one, were you nervous when the singles first started coming out? How it was going to be accepted?
Not at all, because we're not looking at a Billboard Top 200. We're not looking at big radio stations. And every time you post something, regardless if whatever it is, there's always someone who says the opposite.
Yeah.
And that is just what internet has allowed the world to be. So it wouldn't matter because I was pleased the second it came out of the speakers back to me.
Mm.
I had accomplished what I set out to do. Now it's the rest is just, I'm very happy. And I can say that it's been unanimous in all the interviews that I've done around the world. It's like we all have arrived at the same conclusion. And that conclusion is that this is 2023, and my Tramp is updating the sound of White Lion, but still keeping the very important things there.
And the last question is, I saw you posted on Facebook a couple weeks ago. I guess the person who bought your old Harley from that infamous photo shoot and you regretted selling, I guess he reached out to you that he has your old bike.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's again another thing going back in time and stuff like that. And I remember exactly that moment, which is, I also happen to be a person who once in a while, overreact to certain things. But that was sort of right after, the end of White Lion, and I started a Freak of Nature, and that whole vibe that bands like Motley Crue and Bret Michaels on his bike and the Radar Love video had created in LA, where all the rock stars were cruising around on the big Harleys with the custom paint, that were non-existent suddenly. Within a
Right.
couple years, it was non-existent. And I remember my bike being on sale down at one of the trendy shops on Sunset Boulevard, standing right next to Bret Michaels. And
Wow.
once every week I came back, nobody had been in there looking at those bikes. It was nobody was interested in buying a Harley Davidson. Of course, there was someone, but at that moment there for
Yeah.
those, you know. So when the bike went for way too low of a price, it was just like saying goodbye to a period that didn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I would, of course, regretted later on why I didn't say to myself, I'm going to put it in storage.
Mm.
But that kind of thought pattern did not exist right
Yeah.
there. It was almost erasing, and I'm saying this both in honesty, it was almost erasing the traces that you had been there.
Mm. Yeah.
It
Did
was a
uh
kiss.
did you say to the guy, "Hey, can I buy it back?"
Now, the guy who got the bike is not the guy I sold it to.
Okay.
So he must have bought it all again. But I'm just happy that when the guy sent me videos from his garage where he was tuning and he says it's in top shape and running well. I'm just saying, well, at least it's not, out in some junkyard,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you move the brush away from it, and here's the white line, it's faded and stuff like that. To me, that would mean, well, you're definitely passe. But by him keeping the paint job and
Mhm.
and and taking the pride in the bike, you know, told me it ain't over till it's
There you
over.
go. There you go. That's it. Mike, this has been amazing talking to you. Thanks so much for
Likewise, man.
doing
My
this.
pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Great conversation. Thanks for being open about all this stuff too.
Well,
Congrats on the album. Comes out April 14th. Everybody can get it everywhere. All your places music is available. It will be available. And thanks to Frontiers. And you're not coming to Nashville yet. Hopefully later in the year you get down here to Nashville. We'll hang out.
yeah, this is an upper East Coast, a little West tour, stuff like that. It's a big country.
Absolutely. All right, Mike. Take care and have fun. And congrats again.
Thank you, Bay.
Bye.